Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Paradox of Perception, Part 4. It's my birthday. Thanks for everyone who reached out. I appreciate that. And this is my present to you. You're welcome. Just allow the repetition, right? Because this is a difficult subject, right? It's a paradox after all, right? So prepare thyself and let's go. I want to drive home the fact that the artificial reality, the false construct we live in, is a program we all run in our minds. As you listen, wait for the end. If you start to think you know where I'm going with this, you're probably wrong because no one's talking about this but me. The assumption is the truth must be universal, true, independent of perception, because perception can only happen from a place, a point of view that creates a perspective, and perspective is relative. Truth cannot be relative, it must be universal. This is suggesting that universal truth cannot exist because to gather the information that would make up the truth cannot be done without perception. This is the paradox of perception. To work around this, we develop a system of investigation that provides a duplication of results from any point of view, from any frame of reference. This is a different angle on what we've already talked about in part 3, so stay with me. The condition for objective truth is that it must be independent of perception, but this condition can never be verified because perception is required for verification. This is the paradox of perception. We can only simulate the independence of perception through the empirical method, the reproducibility of results for all frames of reference. We statistically approximate to within an acceptable margin of error and present the data to establish majority consensus, a unified perspective across a collection of minds, a collective that are of one mind, a union that merges all perspectives into one, establishes a consensus. However, the duplication of results does not establish universality or objectivity. It only unifies perspective. It removes the variability of perspective, but does not meet the condition for objectivity, which is independence from perspective. It unifies perception into one perspective. That's all it does. This is effective over time. Our ability to discern what works relative to what does not work begins to pull back the curtains of the universe, but only in stages. A complete unification of perspective, a total and universal consensus, does not attempt an improved understanding. It is only the existence of an alternative viewpoint that allows for a deeper comprehension to be gained. Every new discovery only serves to accentuate the possibility that a more acute perspective might offer a better explanation. Explanations that stand the test of time qualify as knowledge and are classified as subjects. Over time we get closer. Our successes in the discovery of the universal laws seem to confirm a world that takes place independent of our perception of it, confirms the assumption that we are separate from the world. But we forget that this assumption can never be confirmed, because confirmation would mean that we could not be aware of it. We make measurements that are consistent across all frames of reference, and in this way negate the variability of perception, but fail to realize that the variability of perspective, is what permits the advancement of knowledge. Accessing a more complete model of reality requires a dissenting perspective. Knowledge cannot advance, or a more complete model of reality cannot be assembled without the relationship between differing points of view, because homogeneous thinking is fixed and will not challenge itself. The process of accessing a more complete version of the truth through the interchange between varied points of view is known as the dialectical process. It is a natural consequence of the unavoidability of perspective. The advancement of knowledge would not happen without the existence of variable points of view. Multiple points of view allows for dialectical interchange, without which we would be unable to approach the truth of our reality. But this breaks the condition for the derivation of objective truth, which is that truth must be separate or independent from perception and perspective. The variability of perception is the only thing, though, that permits the unification of perception, because we only have consensus if there was once disagreement. No one can be in agreement if everyone starts out in agreement. Confirmation of truth, or the combined total of human knowledge, is the result of the dialectical process and would not have been possible under a static unified consensus. Right? Broadly speaking, the interchange of variable perspective is a dialectical process that results in consensus. Unassailable consensus qualifies as knowledge, and applied knowledge results in technology. In this endeavor, we have built a world on top of the world, a reality entirely the product of our perception and constituted by subjects. Is it not weird how we never equate a subject of study with subjectivity? It's a likeness, an approximation that represents a thing, but it's not the thing itself, it's a subject. The reality in which we live is a library of subjects, or the symbolic representation of objects, and we regard the subjects as real. Yes, we live in an artificial world in which technology permits us operation insulated from the natural environment, but it is not the false reality to which I am referring. We are meant to carry out this investigation, this dialectic. It is likely that we lost all of our knowledge at some point in the extreme past, and we have been restoring it painstakingly over time. It is a chain reaction once begun that won't stop. Each of us in every generation plays a part in the development of our civilization. All of our interactions have created the world we find ourselves in. If left to its natural process, we would have recreated our natural way of being as a collective long ago. However, a misstep has slowed our progress and altered our input. I am identifying the root cause of this mistake so we can remove it and return to a natural rhythm. The dialectical process of knowledge building is natural. It is a unification of perception from a diverse set of perspectives. It is a process by which point of view is minimized into consensus through confirmation by the participants of the point in question. It begins with the thesis, which is the status quo or consensus on current methods, to be presented with a counter-thesis that indicates there is a better way, which through demonstration is confirmed by all parties and synthesized with the former to update and upgrade the method and establish a new consensus. This is how it's supposed to work. The world that we live in, our civilization, is built on perception. There is no possibility of coming to a universal truth concerning humanity, a truth that is independent of perception, because there is nothing that takes place outside of perception in society or the library of subjects in which we live. However, that is exactly what has happened. We act as if we have access to the truth because we are separate from the world, because our perception is divided from the world, but we can only unify perception through consensus. To remove the variability of perception from our relationship with the world, and we conflate this with separation. We then apply this false condition of separation to ourselves. Are you following? Believing we are separate, that our perception is divided from the rest of everything because we can simulate that condition and gain access to the truth, has led us to believe that it is in fact true, and because of that we have applied that condition to ourselves, that we are separate from the world and each other, that the objective truth is separate from our perception of it, separate from humanity. In order to find the truth, we must maintain that condition for universality, which is the removal of variability of perception due to perspective, and this can only be done via a workaround, which is the unification of perspective, true for all points of view. If the objective is to know the objective truth, and the condition for truth is that it must be independent of perception, and so not subject to the variability of perspective, then the only method we have by which to do this is verification of the thesis from every perspective. The thesis, that is, that we are separate from the world and each other, but this cannot be verified, only simulated. With people, the verification is simulated with belief. If people believe they are separate, then they act as if they are separate, and the thesis is self-confirmed. If people believe the thesis, their behavior confirms the thesis. The condition of separation is believed by everyone, and maintains a universal consensus, about which there is very little discussion. This is the false reality. The simulated reality and the condition for it is coded in our minds, short-circuiting the natural dialectic to run on the false dichotomy of self versus other and not perspective versus perspective. This creates a strange inversion. Right? Are you following? An inversion of unity and division. What brings us together is the relationship between differing perspectives, the interplay of separate points of view. What divides us and isolates us is the removal of the variability of perspective, the homogenization of point of view, the maintenance of consensus, which makes relationship impossible because there is no interaction between one perspective and itself. In the case of the latter, the establishment for the discovery of truth must maintain the condition of separation of perception, but that condition can never be met. It can only be simulated, and the maintenance of the simulation can only be achieved through the management of belief, the management of consensus belief, by which the alternative viewpoint is the enemy to the unity of perspective, or consensus belief is the enemy of truth. This means consensus management is fostered and maintained through reinforcement of the condition for separation. The removal of a variable point of view, the unification of perspective, the maintenance of consensus is achieved by painting the alternative viewpoint as a threat. The perception of an external threat unifies consensus. This is a corrupted and downgraded version of the dialectical process, with each side claiming universal truth, no possibility of discussion, and the only possible synthesis being conflict. This corrupted dialectic plays out between large-scale belief systems, and the synthesis takes place as an irrational defense of each position, with the only acknowledgement of the other as a threat to their belief and way of life, culminating in a synthesis of victory and defeat, with might defining right. Indeed, we can see that this has become the default iteration of the dialectical process, a conflict between rigid systems of belief as opposed to an honest interchange of perspective. It plays out at all levels of our civilization, not as a rational defense of a body of knowledge, but a protection of a belief system against a competing belief system. These belief systems represent less of a thesis and more the result of conditioning of the adherence to a certain worldview. This corrupted dialectic maintains the establishment of division that, instead of approaching the truth, slows it through the colossal waste of lives in conflict. The simulation of unity of perspective, the unification of point of view, can only take place under the condition of separation, because it is that condition that unifies all points of view, the reproducibility of belief, right? The consensus. It is the condition of separation, the reproducibility of results, that develops a consensus, right? And in society, reproducibility is achieved through belief. It does not unite us, but isolates us in dogmatic belief structures that negate our natural process of learning through relationship. It misdirects a large portion of our capability towards destructive ends. But despite this, a portion of our innate gift for creation is preserved. This can never be destroyed while each of us has some semblance of our unique perspective intact. The peril that we face is to permit the condition to play out to its conclusion by engaging in the synthesized dialectic in which we align with a generalized perspective that is in conflict with another. This will lead to a unified perspective, a removal of the variability of point of view, the negation of perception, causing the cessation of learning, and the ultimate loss of our humanity. It is the uniqueness that we each possess that unifies us, because the exchange between perspectives is what drives our ability to learn as a collective. The tools we have developed through verification never removed perception from the process, because that is impossible. The condition we have mistakenly placed on truth cannot exist. It is not part of our reality. That is the mistake we made. That is what took us off track. To restore our capability, we include perception into the process of discovery of truth. And in so doing, we immediately reveal that universal truth of perception as fundamental to the nature of the universe, not separate but non-local. The apparent separation of our individual minds is evidentiary of the non-locality of consciousness. It resides at all locations. The separation of our minds from each other permits the process of discovery through relationship. That would not be possible without separate points of view. We therefore abandon belief, which is manufactured consensus. Right? This is what I've been saying before. We abandon belief. Now get this is tricky, right? Learning is not possible without separate points of view. But we abandon belief, which is a manufactured consensus, which is a non-variability of point of view, right? And we reject perspective based on division, right? So, which is like this, we reject perspective that is based on the condition that we are all born to, that we are all raised to believe, right? The condition of division, right? We reject that perspective. We rejoin with the perspective that is not based on any conditioning, right? So, our minds, if given room to run without restriction and in concert with each other, would rapidly converge on an organization that facilitates creation at a maximum output and in balance with the surroundings. The value of this would be so obviously better compared to our current model. The attraction would alter the course of our civilization seemingly overnight. And it's so easy to do. We just create an exchange that facilitates everyone's natural affinities and passions and abilities and gives them the tools to work on that stuff, to work on what they want to work on. Gives them the fucking tools, right? We are all responsible for where we are. Everything that we have, everything that we make is ours. Because without everyone living, it wouldn't have come to pass, right? These tools are ours, okay? We were meant to embellish the cosmos, which is not at all what we are doing currently. Let's do the thing. We are unified by our uniqueness, not separated by our beliefs. Stay tuned for part 5.